been a busy couple of weeks, but I'm back again with another tutorial where I take one of the reference shots that I found on Pinterest, which is always my go-to, and attempted to recreate it in Blender. And I really like this tutorial because it's one of those projects where years ago when I was starting out with Blender, I would never have thought I'd be able to make something like this. And even just kind of looking at it when I started trying to recreate this, I was like, how am I going to make any of these parts? And it turns out that actually all the parts are really simple. Full credit to the original designer of this. It's a great piece. I'm still trying to find who put together the original artwork. So if you do know, please leave a comment because I want to link them and give them full credit for the work. But yeah, despite how incredible it looks, actually nothing that complicated going on in here. So we're going to put this together in the next hour or so. We're going to tackle the modelling, the materials, the lighting. We're going to do a little bit of very simple animation with it, make something cool looking. It's been some exciting times on the channel. We've passed over 1,000 subscribers now, which has been a lot of work to get here, but I'm absolutely delighted with it. Please come and hang out on the Discord. If you've got any questions, I'm here to help. Like, don't sit there stuck on things. Like, come and have a chat, and I will do my best to help you, even if it's not related to this tutorial. And if there's anything you'd like to see me tackle in the future, if you've seen an image that you want to try and recreate and you don't know where to start, send it my way and I'll see if we can make a tutorial out of it. Cool. So this is what we're going to be working towards making. As you can see, it's a pretty close match to the reference, and it's basically just simple shapes and materials doing a lot of work, and then some interesting little tricks to make this crazy little mesh, this gel mesh thing. So let's start a new document and get into it. So we can start with the default cube. It's always nice when you get to do that. And it looks like we're making something that's kind of a CD, maybe it's a hard drive, I think, hard drive proportions. So we're going to just start by scaling and making something kind of in that proportion. So scale it up on the Y and on the X, so S to scale. And then we'll tab into edit mode. We're going to select this top face, hit G, and then bring it down on the Z. So something like that. So that's going to be the basic proportion of it. Maybe it's still a bit tall at the moment, so we'll scale it down further. And if you look, this is kind of this like solid resin, like acrylic block that runs all the way through. So we're going to use, so that's going to be this, and we'll use that to also make this net, this kind of gel slimy net thing later on. But we'll tackle that shortly. And then we've got these kind of metal plates. There's one there, one there, one there, one there. So there's 4 in total. So let's start by making this one at the bottom, and we'll kind of put together a workflow for this. So we're going to hit Shift and A, and we're going to make a plane, and we'll just pull it down roughly into position. I'm going to tab into edit mode, vertex select these two, and just scale it down. I prefer to work this way rather than scaling the whole thing. So we'll pick up these two, hit G and move it along on the x-axis. I just want to get it kind of roughly into the proportions that we want. It would help if I was viewing from above so I could actually see properly. So something like that looks about right. I think I want this to be taller. And then we've got like a little cut in here and then curved corners here. So let's recreate these parts. So I think actually that must be a bit taller still, maybe something like that. So now let's put a central cut with Control and R, and then we're going to bevel that. So move your mouse over to the side, just like bevel, and we'll scale up like this. Something maybe like that big. And then we're going to put another cut in the centre, Control R, and we should have bevel selected already, so we'll do the same thing. Put it to there, and then we're just going to select these two vertex, hit G and move along on the x-axis to make that kind of cut out there. And then I want to select these two edges, and then with vertex still selected, before we go any further, actually let's tab out, hit Control and A and choose scale, and then we'll apply it so that our bevel applies properly, and then nothing will happen. So we'll expand that out and choose vertices, and then we're just going to reduce it down. So that's going to be the corner, and then if we bump up our segments we get something like that. And let's just slightly round these corners as well. It's hard to tell what's going on over there, but I think it'd be nice with a slightly rounded corner. So I'll scale our width back, put in a couple of segments, And because this is a flat object, we don't need to do anything too complicated with the geometry. We can be pretty lazy. But I do want to make like a little lip. Can you see there's like a metallic lip that runs all the way around, and then this brushed powder coated surface on top. So hit A to select everything, hit I to inset, and then we'll just pull in like this. And then finally go into edge mode and alt tab on the edge. It should select everything, and then we can hit E to extrude down, and hit Z, and just give it a little bit of depth like that. And there we go. Shade auto smooth, and we should have something that for our purposes looks good. So let's position this properly. Looks like it's a little bit off, and we'll have it just resting on the surface like that. Cool. So now let's build each of these other four. So it's going to be the same process. So we're going to make a new plane. So this one, because we can't really see what's going on underneath, I'm just going to bevel all of them with an angular bevel. So scale down, and I want this to be long and thin, so something like that. Just scale a whole lot. Doesn't need to be exactly the same. Just going to get roughly. Let's work from overhead. Something that's worth doing at this point is to go to our drop down on shading and change this to random so that every object has a different colour. It makes it much easier to see what we're doing. None of this will render, it's just for viewpoint purposes. Okay, so we're just going to apply the scale before we go any further so that our vertices bevel correctly. And with those selected, make sure you got bevel and drag, and nothing will happen until you change that to vertices, and it's going to be too big. So we'll scale it back to there. Honestly, that should be all we need. And we'll just hit I to make sure we're in face mode. Hit A to select everything, I to inset, and it might be too sensitive, but there we go. So we'll try and keep our bevels pretty consistent. Something like that. And then we're just going to select these edges, extrude down. Just maybe a little bit steep, a little bit deep. And we'll just pull this one down into place as well. Okay, so that's two done. And let's tackle this top one. I think we could actually just use the same piece. The only one that looks different is this one here. So let's use the same one for the top. So we'll move it up. And you can see because we duplicated it, it's changed a different colour because it's a different object. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees. Let's snap to the top view. And let's position it something like that. And then we're going to tab into edit mode and make sure you've got X-ray selected. We're going to drag a box around all of these and pull it down so we get something like this. I can see now actually that this tapers in, so that's kind of easy enough to do without remaking everything. So let's put a cut in the centre there, and because of how our geometry is formed, we need to put a cut across. So we're going to do Control R and put cut there. And if we select those two vertices, we can just hit J. And now we can drag all of this down, something like that. And then I'm just going to move this in like that. And this is going to be covered by our spinning CD thing anyway, so it just might add a more interesting shape. Turn off X-ray and see how we're looking. And let's take this object and do the same thing again, and we'll try and work in a little detail in the corner. So snap to overhead view, and again it's a different colour. We'll rotate it through 90 degrees on the Z-axis, pull into the corner, turn on X-ray, and we're just going to select these vertices, and this one wants to be much smaller. And so let's put our cut in there with Control R and our cut there, and then just join them up. And now we can select these. So I think if we do another cut there, Control R, another cut there, Control R, Shift, select them, and then J to join up. And then if we just select all of these, hit S to scale on the Y axis, and then type in 0, it'll straighten it out. And then we can move this up, and then let's try pulling this over to the side like that. And maybe this wants to pull down a little bit. There we go. Something. This is more interesting than it was before, and it adds a bit of variety. So it's completely up to you how you want these to look. Okay, so that's all of our metal plates. What I want to do now is put a slight bevel on everything. So we're going to select this one, go to modifier, add modifier, search, and mine's up there already, but if it's not, type in bevel, and that's kind of what we're going for, but it's a little bit pronounced, and you might find... Hang on, let's just drag this up and down. There we go. So because we've applied our scale, everything's working as it should do. Sometimes you might need to go to geometry and turn off clamp overlap, but it looks like we're okay here. So we're just going to scale this until we get something like that. So it's just got like a little highlight edge, it'll just catch the light better. And we want to apply that to everything else. Rather than having to manually create our bevel, if we select all of these, shift select, and then select this one last, hit Control and L and choose copy modifiers, now everything's nicely beveled and it's looking better already. Okay, so let's make a placeholder for this CD shape. So shift mesh, shift A mesh, and we'll do circle, and we'll just pull it up a little bit, and all we're going to do is tab, hit E to extrude, S to scale, and pull this in, something like that. And then let's go to our top view, select everything with the A key, and we can pull it up and position it, so it's going to be something like that. And let's do now pull this down, so this wants to sit above these plates, but this one then sits above that. And let's just select everything, push the 3 key to go into face mode, then hit E to extrude and pull this down. So I've just got a little bit of depth. That's maybe a bit thick for CD, but so it's just so we can make sure that everything sits as it should do. Okay, and then all of this stuff we can add in later on when we do our detail pass, but let's make a placeholder for the center as well. So we're going to select all of this, Alt Shift, and then click on an edge, Shift and D to duplicate, and then S to scale, so we know that that's matching up, and then we'll hit E to extrude again and scale. Whoops, sometimes it gets a bit weird, and then we'll hit A. We don't want to hit A because it's going to select everything at once, so if we now hover over and hit the L key, select linked, and then hit E to extrude and pull that down. Okay, so we've got kind of the basis of everything in place. And then the last thing we need to do is put another box over the top that's going to be our mesh. So we're just going to select this one, duplicate it, Shift and D, and we're just going to scale it out slightly and pull it up to make sure it's covering everything. And then if we select this bottom face, pull it down, and there we go. So now will be a good time to just name everything. So we will name this one, I will call it slime mesh because I can't think of a better name, and we'll just hide that for now. And then we're going to call this acrylic box. I'm just using F2 to rename everything. And then this plane, we'll call this, I think they look a bit like dog tags, like military dog tags, so I'm just going to call them that for now. Dog tag 1, dog tag big, and then we've got dog tag small center, dog tag top left, dog tag top right, and then we're going to select all of these. Oh, we forgot to name the CD, so we know that's a circle. We can do that in a second. I'm going to select all of these, control clicking, including the hidden slime mesh, then hit M, move to new collection, and we're going to call this guide mesh. We are going to end up using a lot of these for our final geometry, but I like to keep everything organised like this. So acrylic box also needs dragging into guide mesh. Here we go. So I'm just going to call this CD. And let's see how we're looking. It's interesting, every time you name something it gives it a new colour. Cool. I'm actually just going to duplicate our bevel onto the acrylic block, so we'll select the box first and then the dog tag next. Control L, copy modifiers, and again everything just looks a bit nicer with a bevel. We'll leave the CD for now, but so now is a very good time to save. Can't think of a good name, so we'll call it Slime Drive 1. I like to give everything, as you'll know from my tutorials, I like to put everything a number after it so I can save incremental, and that means that I can roll back to an old version if there's a crash or I just run out of undos. So I'll hit save as. Now would also be a good time to subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up. You know, if you want to, just saying, it really helps me out. Okay, so let's get into the real meat of this. So the two most difficult things to make, or the things that look like they're going to be most difficult, is this CD and this slime netty grid thing. So let's do that first. So we've got this mesh, and what we're going to start to do is cut into the faces using the knife tool roughly where we want these bubbles to form. So we're going to start at the top and we're just going to cut loose shapes out. Now mine's not going to match perfectly, but we basically want to make a face everywhere that we're going to put one of these bubbles in. So you do not have to follow me, you don't have to follow the reference. The more kind of random you can make it, the better. So, but we just want to keep linking back up to points. So we're cutting with the knife tool, using the K key to reselect it every time. And maybe let's make some little ones in here. Something like this. And this is horrible topology, but it doesn't actually matter for what we're doing. So we'll just keep making these cuts. Back into knife mode. So it looks like we've got another. Let's make another big one here, and you can cut them right up to the edges, and we'll extend round the sides in a bit. But so we're just going to keep making these shapes. And like I said, it doesn't matter how closely yours follows the reference or follows mine. This is your own piece of work, so the more interesting and unique you can make it, the better. No idea what I'm going to end up here. And we'll just find some kind of links between here. So we're going to apply a bunch of modifiers in a second to make this the effect that we want. We need to think a little bit about what happens around here as well. So let's carry on looping around. Something like that. And then we'll link that to the corner. I think we're going to end up deleting this bottom face anyway. So I'm just going to speed through this a little bit more. You can take as much time as you want to make the effect that you want. Here. So you can see we're building this like cracked, fractured shape. And I know it looks bizarre at the moment, but I promise you it will look cool. Well, hopefully it will look cool when we finish. I want to keep this as an exposed circle as well, so we'll do something like that. Nearly done. And like anything in Blender, the more time you can spend getting it the way you want, the better. Let's put another cut through there. Now the sides are less important because they're not going to be particularly visible in our final shot. You can see that we're mainly viewing from overhead, but so I'll just keep linking these up. Okay. I think that should do us. So just check that we've got kind of interesting details all around, and then we're going to use our first modifier. So if we go to add modifier, search, and then type in wireframe, and this will already give you an idea of what we're going to do. So it's taken every one of those edges and turned it into geometry. So we've got the start of this, and we're just going to bump the thickness up a little bit. And you might notice that some bits look a bit uneven, or you might have some slightly crunchy geometry depending on how it's set up. So make sure you've turned on boundary, and we can play around with the thickness of this, but we'll get more of an idea of what's working when we've added our next modifier, which is our subdivision surface. And you can now see some of the magic starting to happen. So we're going to bump this up to 2 for now. In fact, we might need to go for 3, and then right click and shade auto smooth. And you can now see that we've got this kind of bubbly, curvy, warped effect. And we're actually not too far off. If you want to add in some more smaller bubbles, we can select a face, right click and choose subdivide. And that didn't do anything, so we're going to do it manually. Oh, I see why that happened. Okay, so if we can now select these 2 vertices and hit J, these 2 vertices and hit J, and then tab out, and you can see we've made some smaller bubbles. Maybe I want something, do I want to make this one smaller? Let's subdivide this face as well. I'm going to have to do the same thing, so we could just cut some more faces in. There we go, we've got some interesting stuff going on. And this edge here, I want this part to actually run over the side. So we can just select this edge, make sure you've got your edge selected, and then hit X and delete edges, and it looks like something scary's happened, but if we tab back in, you can see now it kind of runs over the side. And is there anywhere else I want to do that? Maybe at the top as well, so I'll do the same thing. Right, click on the edge, right click, not right click, sorry, X, delete edges, and there we go. And we can bump up the thickness a bit, make it look more organic. We can also add a solidify modifier at this point and put it at the bottom, and then if we increase the thickness, oh, things get a bit screwy if you go the wrong way. We can just give it a little bit more thickness and depth, which would be nice when we render our gel effect. So that was easier than anyone was expecting, right? I think I've made this a little bit thick now, so let's just turn down our wireframe but keep our thickness. There we go. Cool. It's looking nice. And you can keep going in and cutting and tweaking, and all of this is still editable. So if you tab back into edit mode, and especially if you turn off your solidify modifier, it might make it hard to see what's going on. You can keep changing the shape, adding in more cuts where you want them. So that's the beauty of modifiers, it's all fully editable. Like, you might decide that some bits are too weird and thick, and all of this can be changed and played around with. Cool, something like that should do us for now. Nice. Okay, let's tackle the CD, the second scary part of our project. So I'm going to hit backslash, so I'll go into solo edit mode, and we're going to snap to the top view, and we're actually going to use this just as a guide because we're going to make everything from scratch again. So if I go to object, set origin, oh, my reference is in the way, set origin to geometry, so it snaps back into center, shift S, cursor to selected, and then we're going to make a new circle, so mesh, circle, and now my reference is in the way here, let's put it there. I want to make this 64, and we're going to get it roughly to the size, and I'm actually just going to delete this because I don't want it for now. Excuse me. So tab into edit mode and A select all vertices, and then we're going to hit shift and D and scale, and we're going to make the inner loop. And what I want to do now is go into edge select mode, so 2, and then alt shift on one of these edges, select everything, E to extrude, S to scale, and we're going to pull in like this, just make a bit of an edge, and then we're going to do the same thing on this one, so alt shift on the edge, E to extrude, S to scale. I'm going to pull out, so we've got a boundary now, which will be useful in a bit. Now we're going to make another circle, so mesh circle, shift A mesh circle, and we'll set this one to 32, and I'm going to scale it down, and let's position it at the top here. something like this, maybe a little bit smaller. And then we're going to tap into edit mode and we're going to do the same thing, so E to extrude and S to scale, so we've just got a little bit of a boundary, something like that. And then we're going to start placing these circles, so in object mode, Shift and D, and so you can just scale up and down, so maybe one here, and we'll scale this one down quite a bit. And then we'll make this group of 4, so Shift and D, and then move it along on the X. Select both of them, Shift and D, move it down on the Y. And then we can make another one here. Again, like, this is all up to you. You can make it as close to the reference as you want. I like it to have a bit of randomness in there, but also to make it seem like there are some patterns that make sense. So I'll do something like that. And then let's maybe have like a little triangle of them. Something like this. And make a bigger one at the edge there. And let's do 2 of these like this, and we'll make it a group of 3. And we'll do the same thing, but I'll rotate it through 45 degrees. I think there's probably enough going on there, but let's put this one at the end here. And okay, something like that should do for us for now. So now what we need to do is select everything with the A key, and then select this part of our CD again and hit Ctrl and J so everything's joined. And now we're going to fill in all of these faces, which is way easier than you think. So we need to make sure that it looks like everything's selected already, which saves us a lot of work, but let's do it manually just in case yours aren't. So Alt select the edge, Alt Shift and click, and we're going to click on each of these outer edges. So you might need to zoom in a little bit as you go. So we'll just work our way around, and this is an easy or a hard job depending on how much geometry you've made for yourself. So if you select anything by mistake, just undo, Control Z. So again, that's selected the wrong bit. I'm going to have to zoom in a bit. That one's proving really tricky to select. Nearly done. One last tricky bit to do. And make sure you're selecting the outer loops, not the inner loops. Okay, perfect. So now all we need to do is fill the faces, and the shortcut for filling a face in Blender is F, but if we do that, it's going to fill all of the inner faces, and you can see it's a bit of a mess. So we're going to use Alt and F, and now we have this magic, and it's joined everything up neatly. If you found that your geometry looks a bit weird, say it looks something like this, just select everything and scale on the Z-axis, make sure everything is flat, because sometimes things can get moved around. So now we have the basis of our CD, and I'm just going to give it a bit of depth. So we're going to select that edge, and then, in fact, no, we'll just select this edge for now, so we're going to extrude down like this, pull down, and then if you look at the reference, there's like a little step down and then this clear plastic part. So let's carry on making that. So Alt Shift select this edge, and then we're going to hit E to extrude, S to scale, and then we're going to hit G to put it down on the Z axis slightly. So we've got our step, E to extrude again to put an edge in, and then we'll just pull it into something like this. And we will look at if we want to make these cutouts in a second. Let's try and get a sense of the scale of this. So this wants to be bigger, and then it's a little bit hard to know what's going on here, like some kind of spindles coming through. I think that's how we're going to do it. So we'll just put another edge in there, and then we'll just hit E to extrude down on the Z. And I just want to give this a bevel as well. So I have modifier search, bevel, and let's see. And we're going to increase the angle so that it doesn't you see that when it's set to 30, it's stepping each of these edges. So we're going to bump it to 60, and then we're just going to reduce the size of it and put in an extra segment, and it just gives everything a nice effect. It'd be interesting to see if we apply a subdivision surface now what happens. I think it will work. So yeah, it's just smooth over the edges, and we've kind of cheated our way to this nice geometry. The only thing I've noticed is we haven't given these inner parts depth, so let's see if this works. So we're going to alt select this edge and then go select similar, and we'll choose let's try face angles. No, that's not the one I'm looking for. Amount of faces around edges. There we go. It's selected all of these. It's also selected this, so we're just going to alt shift click on that to unselect, and then we can hit E to extrude down on the Z axis, and it might run a little bit slowly because it's trying to put bevel on it too. There you go, nice. So now I can tab back into our final piece. Because we're giving this a bit of depth now, let's select both of these and pull it up. And let's quickly make this part in the centre, which again we're going to use the same technique to do, so it's going to be nice and easy. So we're going to start by selecting one of these edges, Alt Shift, and then Shift and D to scale, bring it in slightly, and then we're going to hit P to separate by selection. So now we should have this editable part. Backslash key to go in solo mode, and we'll flip to view over the top. So we know we want a circle in the centre, but let's start by making a boundary edge. So A to select everything, make sure you've got edge selected, E to extrude, S to scale, so we've got boundary there. And then in the centre we're going to make a Shift A circle, and it's way too big. In fact, let's delete that one and come out of edit mode, and we'll make our circle again so that it's a separate object. And you won't be able to see it, so let's type 0.2 so we can actually view the size. So we want one in the centre, and then so maybe like that kind of size, and then let's give it a boundary, scale, and then we'll go back into object mode, and then if we move this one up on the Y, something like this, and then we want to rotate it through 360 degrees, duplicating it as we go. So if we hit the backspace key and choose 3D cursor and then hit rotate, it will now rotate around the center point. So we can now hit Shift and D, rotate, and rotate on the axes, and then we're just going to type in 360 divided by 6, and then we should be able to hit Shift and R to replicate that command, and there we go. So we're going to do exactly the same trick, but there's actually like a little lip in here as well, so let's model that before we go any further. So we're going to select that edge, extrude and scale, and then we'll do extrude and scale again, and we'll pull that down in a second, but now we can extrude and scale one more time, pull that in fairly tight. And then you know the drill, so we're going to hit A to select everything, Shift, select this last, Control and J to join, and then select that edge, and then we'll work our way around, just holding down Alt and Shift as we go, and then Alt and F, and it will fill in our faces. And if we just select this edge, select loops, edge ring, and then you have to go into vertex mode and then into face mode. And we'll just hit E to extrude to pull that down slightly. And then let's select that edge, Alt Shift, select similar amount of faces around edge, and it will select all of these inner ones and that outer loop, which is exactly what we want. And then we'll just hit E to extrude and Z to pull down. And there we go, we've got our central detail. So we're just going to select this one and then select that, and then hit Control L, copy modifiers, and it should take over our bevel and our subdivision. And things are looking real nice. Okay, so we're just going to save before we move on to the next part. Just check we've not got any geometry crashing into anything. I think we're good. So File, Save Incremental. So the next thing I want to get into is setting up our cameras and our lighting, and then we will look at doing our materials, and we're actually well over halfway into this project now. So I'm just going to go over and set my render engine to cycles and turn on GPU compute, and then if we push into viewport shading, this is where we're at the moment. So I want to delete this light that we've got, and I'm going to bring in an HDRI, which I'm using the Easy HDRI plugin. I've covered this in earlier tutorials. It's very easy to install. If you need it, go and Google it. It's a free add-on. You can donate if you can afford to. You should. And we're going to go to, I'm going to bring in an HDR. I have a bunch of HDRs downloaded from Polyhaven. I'll put a link in the description. I'm going to use the studio lighting for this, and then we hit create world nodes, and we've already got some much better lighting going on. So under render properties, we're going to go to film and choose transparent, and I'm just going to turn this down to 0.6, and then I want to add in a plane underneath. So Shift A, mesh plane, and we'll scale that out and just pull that down under our object. And we'll just go into works. I can remember what this mode's called, viewport shading, just for speed. In fact, let's use this mode so we can see everything. Okay, and then let's position our camera. So if we hit this button here to toggle camera view, we've already got a camera in the scene. If for some reason you haven't, hit Shift and A and go to camera, but there should be one by default. And then we're going to go to view and camera to view. And then let's try and match our shot as best we can, or however you want this composition to be. And I'm going to change the proportions so that we are, let's say 1200 by 1200, so a square. So something like this. Maybe a bit more. Yeah, something like that. Oh. And again, we can tweak this, it's only rough, but. And then when you've got something that you're happy with, and turn off camera view so that if I move my mouse away now, I can then hit that button and go back. So it's useful for making changes and keeping your view locked. So we'll go back into render mode, and I'm just going to give this a new material. So let's call this black floor, and we'll set the base color to black. And let's bring our roughness down so it's got a bit of reflection in it. And then I want to make another light. I'm going to make an area light. So let's hit the camera view to the side. Shift and A, mesh. No, not mesh. Light area. And I want to pull this above. And I'm going to scale it. Scale it on the Y. And we'll just pull it above a little bit more. So it should be sitting pretty much straight down, looking on top of your object. And now you can see we've got a much nicer, more studio type lighting. Another thing I'd like to turn on when I'm editing my composition is to select our camera, and where it says viewport display, this section here, passepartout, I think that's, I don't know, I'm going to look up how you say that. Just pull that to 100%, it blacks out all the detail that you're not looking at, so you can really concentrate on getting this looking right. So I think we're in a good place with this. So now we're going to create the first passes of the materials so we can see everything we're working with. So let's start with this one, and we'll just hit new, and we will set this to like a lime neon green, and we'll just call this slime material. Don't worry, we're going to make this properly. This is just so that we can check what materials we need to make. And we'll select this one as well, so the block behind, and we'll call this acrylic. And let's set the base colour to something similar, like kind of yellowy green, and that's fine for now. And then let's just select one of these dog tags for now, and we'll use backslash to edit it, and we need to make 2 materials here. So we're going to hit the plus button and make 2 slots. And let's select the first one, and we'll call this one shiny metal, and we will make this like a grey, light grey. Turn the metallic up full and the roughness down, and we won't see much because of how our lighting is, so we're going to tweak that. We should have like a metallic surface, and then we're going to tab into edit mode, and then we want to select these faces here, and then we're going to select the second material and hit assign, and nothing's going to happen yet because we don't have a material in there. So we'll make our new material and we'll call this powder coated metal, and we'll make this a dark grey. And we'll dial up the roughness. We'll make it metallic as well, but we'll really dial up the roughness. So you're not going to see a huge amount until we get back into our edit mode, into our full scene mode, but you should now see we have this metallic highlight running all the way around. So we're going to do this on all the other objects. So let's just select these and then hit Control and L and link materials, and it's going to make everything the shiny chrome because that's the first material we have. But you'll see we've got 2 slots in there, so let's just select these. Not the area light. Select these 4. Backslash to edit, and then we can just work our way around. Select the second material and hit assign. And again, it's a little bit hard to see in this scene, but trust the process, it is working. And then this is going to be very tricky, so I think the easiest way to do it would be to select everything and assign it to powder coated metal. And we're going to bring in all of these patterns and textures later on anyway, but let's concentrate on getting the base materials in. So we're going to select, let's just go into this mode so we can see better. We're going to select all of these edges like this, and I don't think we actually need to select that one, but we do need to select every one of these edges as well. So let's use the trick we used before we get too far into this. Alt Shift, so select one of these edges, and then we'll go select similar amount of faces around the edge. That did not work now because we've got so many other edges, so we're going to have to do this the boring way. So I might just time lapse this, but we're going to work our way around and select all of these edges. Okay, and with all of those selected, we're just going to select these 2. In fact, I've got 3 there. We're going to select all of those edge loops, and then select the vertex, and then select the face. And then we actually just want to select one more loop around. So if we go to select more and choose more like that, perfect. That's everything we need now, and now we can apply our shiny metal again. And then if we go back into our main scene, go back to render view. Okay, so this has given me a kind of bullet hole effect, which is kind of cool, but it's not. I don't want this for this scene. I'm just going to turn off subdivision for now, and that will fix our problem. You can see that it still looks rounded enough. Also, we're going to turn on auto smooth. There we go. And great. So that's all of our materials made, and the next thing we need to do is let's have a look at the slime, which is going to be pretty easy to put together, but we're just going to save before we progress. So let's save incremental. So we're going to go up to the shading tab with our slime mesh selected, and let's bring our camera into the right view, and let's also bring in, make sure we're in rendering mode. Okay, so we're actually going to delete this principled BSDF. So everything will go super black, and we're going to make a glass BSDF, and we're also going to make a transparent BSDF. I always get those two mixed up. And just make sure you got the node wrangler turned on. So preferences, add-ons, node wrangler. It just makes it easy to preview things as we go. So what we're going to do is mix these two together. So we're going to go search, mix shader, and we're just going to connect these two together. Connect that to the surface. and we should have like a completely glass see-through material, which might be what you want, it might not. I'm going to bring my roughness up, and I'm going to give it a lime green type material, and now you can see we've got this kind of like gel-like shader, and depending on where you move the factor here, you can make things more or less translucent. So I want something like this. That's looking pretty cool already. I also want to add like a neon, almost like a fluorescent glow to the edges. So we're going to use a Fresnel node, and if we Control-Shift-Click on that, you're not going to see a lot going on. Let me just rotate my camera. So we're going to need to put in a color ramp. Oh, hang on, here we go. We need to move our index of refraction first. So we just want it to kind of pick out the edges. It's a little bit hard to see. Let's put a color ramp in as well. And then if we pull, make sure we're previewing that, so Control and Shift to preview that edge. And then we can pull these edges in tighter. And let's mess about with our index of refraction. So we want something like this, so that it's kind of darker at the edges and glowing in the centre. And now we can connect another mix shader in. So we're going to connect one into that section and another into surface. So the shader in surface, and we're going to select the colour ramp out into the factor. And then if we make another shader, so we're going to make an emission shader here, and you can see now it's glowing at the edges. So we'll just make this kind of more of a, let's make it more of a yellow. And then we can pull down the strength. Something like that. Let's go back to our camera view, and then so you can up the strength to get more of an edge glow like that, or you can pull it down, something like that. And you can also then play around with the index of refraction, and it'd be little movements because suddenly it'll snap into. But I think I want something like that. Cool. And you might want to play around with the colours. You might want something a darker green. It's all up to you. And let's do the same thing on this material. So it's basically the same kind of material. We'll delete that. Make sure you're just deleting the principal BSDF. And we'll go search. Glass BSDF. Transparent. BSDF. And then we're going to make a mix shader. That's the surface, and then we can play around with the factor, increase the roughness, and give it a kind of greeny yellow gel colour. And that's the basis of our acrylic type material. And again, if you pull it all the way over to the left, you get a much more like solid resin. If you pull it all the way over to the right, it's almost completely clear, and because it's sat on a black background, we're not seeing much. Perfect. Okay, the next thing I want to do is give this background section a texture. So we'll go Shift A, and we're just going to make let's make a Voronoi texture. So what I want to do is alter the roughness, so parts of it are shiny and parts of it are less shiny. So if we Control Shift on this, and if we play around with the scale, we can kind of make, you can see we've got some spots, so let's make it something like this. So for me it's about 6, and let's dial, what can we turn up here? Let's turn up the detail and play around with our, I don't know what this value is called, hang on. lacunarity? Who knows? If you know what that means, please tell me. And let's just try connecting a math subtract node in there. I actually want it to connect to the bottom value. That's because I'm not previewing this. There we go. So if we decrease the subtract value, we get more black areas. So the black area is going to be completely shiny, and the white area is going to be completely rough. Let's just play around with some settings until we get something that looks a bit nicer. Detail like that. And I know it looks a bit weird at the moment, but if we now connect a color ramp into here, and then Control Shift on this one, and if we then can just tighten these values up a little bit more. I'm going to make this a dark grey, and I'm going to make this a slightly lighter grey, and then we're going to connect that to the roughness of our surface. And it's hard to really spot, but you can see we've just got this kind of like all these little marks and blemishes, and just a kind of a layer of dirt that looks a little bit more realistic. You might not be able to see it on your screen, but you can just, I've just got these like little highlights and spots that do make a difference to the final render. Okay, so now we're going to tackle this texture and these patterns here. So it's very easy to do. We're going to select these four, and let's go into layout mode, backslash to view them separately, and let's view from above, and we're going to hit Tab key, and because we've got all four selected, if I now hit A, everything selects, and we're going to go UV, project from view, and now we'll change to our UV editing tab. So what we've done is we've created a flat layout of these four objects, and if we actually just scale all of these up now, whoop, sorry, my mouse is being a bit overly sensitive, so we want them to fit in this box, and we can actually pick these up and bring them down and scale up again. And what we're going to do is we're going to export this layout into an image editor. So if you go to UV, oh, let's just move this out of the way, UV, export UV layout, and then give it a nice easy name, so dog tag UVs, and I just want to set this to 4096, so it's this nice high resolution 4K image. And then we hit export UV layout, and then it's time to load an image editor of your choice. So I've loaded this into Photoshop, and here is my UV map. So we're just going to name this layer UV map so you can see it. I have this image that I've already put together of components that I'm going to use to make it up. So it's a case of finding elements on Pinterest, stock image sites, creating your own stuff. And I'm just going to paste it in and lay it out onto my tags. So I will let you work out how yours are going to look, and I will meet you in a minute with the finished ones. So this is my final layout. I'm just going to put a white layer underneath. Oh. There we go. And then I'm going to turn off my UV map, and we should be able to save this out as a Photoshop file, but you can export it to JPEG. So it's dog tag UVs. I'm just going to give it a pattern, and there we go. And if we go back into Blender, we go into our shading mode. What we should be able to do is Shift A, search image texture, sorry, and load this in. And if we Control Shift, we'll now see our patterns laid out. And we're going to use this as a mask. So we want to cut to the shiny material that's underneath. So I'll just disconnect this for a second, go back to our principal shader. And if we choose this, we can select this principal BSDF. So we're selecting our shiny metal and then picking up our BSDF. And we're going to hit Control and C to copy it, go back to our other tag and bring that in, so we've got the same settings. and we're going to make a mix shader and connect the principle to the bottom, the darker metal to the bottom and the shiny chrome to the top, and then connect that, and nothing should change until we hit our colour into the factor. And it's a little bit hard to make out with this lighting, but if we rotate you can see that we've got the shiny metal. In fact, if we just go into this view, there you go, it's much clearer. Nice. So now we can go back to our final scene and hit the render button, the render preview, and there we go, we've got a nice metallic finish. Now we might want to rough up some of that metal, maybe it's too hard to pick out, so there we go, that's working better. Okay, so let's do the same thing on our CD, and it's exactly the same technique. So go into edit mode, view from the top, and then make sure you've got everything selected in edit, UV, project from view, go into our UV editing, and we can just hit the X button to remove that. Hit A to select everything, and we're just going to scale it up so that it fits nicely in our UV space. And then UV, export UV layout, CD design UV. Make sure we're at 4K. And then I've actually already made one, so we'll go into our shading tab. And it's exactly the same idea. So let's go into our powder coated metal. And you can see that we're actually using the same material here, so it's already got our image, so we're going to duplicate that material and call it CD powder coated, because we want to drop a different image in here. And I've created this kind of like tribal tattoo type design, which doesn't line up perfectly on this one. If it doesn't line up exactly the way you want, you can preview the image up here, and we can just move our, let's make sure that we're working in a way that we can see. So if we move our UV about, we can position it where we want. So I think we're looking good. The only thing left that I want to change is I want to take this material here on the spindle, and we'll make it a white plastic. So new, got a base colour of that. Let's set our roughness pretty high, and I just want to bring in a subsurface weight of 0.2, so it's slightly see-through and slightly resiny. And I think we are basically done with the scene. Only thing that I would like to add as a little bit of interest is a little light shining through one of the holes. So I'm going to make a point light and bring it up so we can see it. And let's set the colour to like a blue. And let's position it. Let's see where's a good spot to our overhead view. So we want it to shine through one of these holes like this. So we'll just put it under the CD object. And let's increase the strength to 200, see what we get. So it's just giving like a little backlight effect in there and just adding a bit of interest. And let's do a quick render and see how we're looking. Okay, so I think we're looking good. There's a few little finishing touches I want to add to this scene to just give it a little bit more interest and realism. And they're all nice and easy to do. So let's have a look at, I don't know if you can see this, like little bubbles in the slime. So we are going to use some more modifiers to make this. So let's tab out. And we're going to make a Shift A mesh. Let's make a UV sphere. And we can just put it here at the moment. Just tab back. Just hit the full stop key and go to bounding box center again. So we're just going to scale this down. That should be fine for now. And shade auto smooth. And we're just going to call this bubble, and I want to use the slime material that we've got. So I'll just check that's looking right, and what we want to do now is select our mesh here, and then we're going to add yet another modifier at the bottom. So we're going to go to search particle system, and let's just select our mesh and our bubble for now and edit in this mode, so things should be a bit faster. And then we are going to go to our edit into our particle, and we're going to change emitter to hair, and that in itself is quite a cool effect, but it's not what I'm looking for this. So if we go to render, and then we're going to change our render as object, and then choose our object here. And you can see now we've got these kind of like little bubbles in and out of the surface. So let's increase the scale a bit and the randomness. And let's go to source and emit from volume. No. And let's change the distribution to random. Change distribution to random and turn up. Yeah, that's looking good. We can bring down the number, and if we bring down the hair length, they will now be more inside the mesh, and we'll just increase the scale again. So we've got these kind of interesting little organic gloopy bubbles, and I think if we pull our particle system up before the solidify, that didn't make any difference. There we go. If we check use modifier stack, they're now sitting more inside our mesh. Nice. And we can just pull this off to the side so it's out of shot. That's looking really good. And now I want to add in a volume. So we've done this in previous tutorials, but if we hit Shift and A, mesh and cube, so we need to make a cube that fills our entire scene, and then we're going to call this volume cube. And with that selected, we go into shading and give it a new material, and we're going to delete this and go Shift A, search volume scatter, and we're going to connect the volume to the material output. And you can see we've now got this fog. If we turn it down a lot, so maybe let's try like 0.003. Needs to be even more than that, I think. And we turn up our anistropy. I need to go on a pronunciation course. We might need to make this even less foggy. You can see it's just giving like a little bit of like, almost like you could let off a smoke machine in the room. It just makes things look a bit more natural and realistic. So let's do another render. A bit of advice, it might be worth, because these renders can take a long time for now, maybe set a time limit on your render. So I set it to 1 minute here. Also something to just check is on your slime mesh, make sure that your subdivision modifier in render is bumped up to 3, otherwise it might look a little bit faceted. And a final thing that will make your life easier is if you click on this little funnel with your volume cube selected and turn on this restriction toggle selectable and then make it unselectable, because it's covering everything else in the scene, it makes it really hard to edit. Okay, let's do another render and see where we're at. Nice, we're looking very cool, and you can see that the volume's just kind of given like a little bit of atmosphere. It just makes everything look more realistic and believable. Okay, so we're now going to do 2 more things and then we're done. So let's go to compositing and turn on use nodes, and I want to add in a viewer node, and we'll connect our image up to the viewer, and you should be able to see our last render. And what I want to add in is a distortion, I think it's called distortion, lens distortion. Add in a lens distortion node, so we'll connect image to the image slot and then image out into here. And then if we dial up the distortion, you can see you can do all sorts of weird stuff there. So I don't want to use that distortion, we'll set that back to 0, but I do want to change the distortion, and you can create this kind of slightly out of focus, and you can really push it to get some very cool edges like this, which might be the effect that you want. Let's change it to projector and see what happens there. I think projector's working well for me. None of those sliders have any effects in that. So it's just a case of playing around until you find the effect that you want. Let's not use projector, and let's just put the edges at 0.1. So it's just kind of, might go even half of that, so 0.05. Yeah, there you go. And it's just given that kind of colour separated edge. Just looks a little bit more realistic and a little bit more sci-fi, cyberpunky. I'm also going to add in a glare image. So we'll connect like that. Now, again, you might like that effect, giving that kind of like cyberpunk, very Instagram look. I'm going to change this to fog glow, and then let's try increasing the size of it. Did I want fog glow or did I want ghosts? Nope, I wanted fog glow. There we go, it's the threshold that I want to be able to adjust. So if you bring the threshold down, you can really increase the amount of glow. Let's put it at like 0.5. Nice, okay, and then so we can come out of this tab again now if we go to layout. So the only other thing I want to do, just a real quick hack, is if we take this block that we've got, the acrylic block, and we make some other smaller ones inside. It's going to be a little bit tricky to see in this view. Let's So the other thing I want to do is take this acrylic block and tab into solo mode, and then make sure that we're in bounding box center, and I think I can work from this shading view. So select viewport shading, and then we're going to hit Shift and D to scale it, and we're going to make some smaller blocks inside. Whoop. You really don't need to think too much about this, just kind of make some different shapes. So I'll duplicate that one, and maybe we'll rotate it 90 degrees. That's not 90 degrees, Blender, what have you done there? There we go. Let's make this one really thin, flat. Let's try doing one more like that. And then we'll go into our final scene, and it just creates this cool bit of visual interest inside, and because of all the refraction and reflection, it looks like it's way more detailed than it is. I've also just realised I forgot to make the glass shader that goes in the centre of here, so let's quickly do that now. So we're going to shift into viewport mode for speed, and we'll select this edge, and then if we go to select more, now I've got mine mapped to a shortcut so I can select faster. So we're going to make another material, glass, and we could actually use the acrylic that we've got in there for now and assign it. And let's rename, so duplicate it by hitting this button here, and then rename it CD glass. And then we'll go to the shading tab, just wait for everything to fire up. And that's kind of looking cool already actually. I don't know how much I want to change this, but we could give it maybe a blue colour, or we could keep it completely clear, whatever effect you'd like to. And then you can Bump down the transparency. Yeah, I think we're looking good. I actually just want to put in a little bit of detail into the surface as well. So we're going to make a couple of loop cuts. It's all just things that can catch the light. So I'll select all three of these. I'll go into layout to make sure we've got all our tabs. We're just going to bevel these edges. And then Alt-E and extrude along normal. We'll just bump them up slightly. And then when we go back into our render mode, it's a little bit hard to see in my preview, but it should just provide a little bit of visual interest to that section. So I forgot something very important at this point before we render, and that is that at the moment all of my nodes are plugged into the preview, so we just need to take this and return it to the composite, and now we'll see it in our final render. So if you're finding that your effects aren't showing, make sure you do that. And there you go, final render. I hope you got a lot out of this. It's a nice and quick and easy one to do. I really enjoyed putting it together. If you could leave me a comment or a thumbs up, or if you'd subscribe, that really helps me out a lot. And come hang out on the Discord. We do fun Blender things, and we're getting there. You know, there's not a lot of us at the moment, but I like answering questions. I like meeting you all, and it'd be great to see more of you in the Discord. And if you have any ideas for images that you'd like me to try and recreate in the future, send them my way. I like a challenge, and I'll see you in the next video.